Good morning, everyone. So glad that again that you're here with us. Other guests are continuing to arrive, but let's go ahead and get started. Today's topic is Understand Me, assessing the behavioral dynamics of family relationships. And we all have a special guest today as well with Brian Brogan, and he will give us his insights today, and we'll introduce him in just a moment. But again, so glad you're here. We took an intentional pivot on our normal topics that we have for our webinar series. So many times we talk about business and or leadership related topics. Today, we took the intentional pivot to discuss family relationships. And as we know, personal relationships inevitably affect work relationships and what we do every day in our work, especially being at home like we are now over the last few months. So we're going to discuss this topic, but today our hosts are Lee Ellis and Hugh Massie. If this is your first time with us, Lee Ellis is a nationally recognized leadership coach, an author, certified speaking professional, and also works as strategic partner with DNA Behavior. Hugh Massie is the CEO of DNA Behavior International and a global human performance accelerator and a behavioral insights pioneer, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, mentor, and board member. So we are excited to hear insights and wisdom and experience today on this specific topic. Just a note about Lee, I'll let you introduce Hugh, and then Hugh will introduce Brian, but I wanted to speak. Now, Lee, you had mentioned that you have a particular interest in this topic by virtue of your experience. You have a master's in family relationships and human development. Your wife, Mary, is a counselor and therapist. So you have some vested personal interest in this topic. So if you want to talk about that a bit more and why we're kind of talking about this topic today and why it's of interest to you.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Well, it's great to be here today and talking about this subject because as a leadership coach, when I'm working with an individual, a leader, I'm always paying attention to how confident they are, their inner confidence, because their inner confidence and their self-awareness helps usually their others awareness. And when you have others awareness, it really helps you as a leader, self-awareness and others awareness. And of course, we've been working in that area for many years with the DNA behavior. But I'm a slow learner. And it wasn't until I actually saw the graphics that my wife and I were 2 standard deviations apart on every factor of our personality, except one. And we were 3 standard deviations apart there, and that was patience. And I had to learn how to turn down my intensity, slow it down, just to talk to her in a different way than the way I like to be talked to, because the way I like to be talked to is just get in my face and go at it. But that doesn't work so well for somebody who's designed like her. So it's been a powerful tool for me in our marriage. And during this last year, I've really worked on that. I'll come back to that a little bit later. So it's a wonderful way to help people start to see the differences in human behavior in their family, their spouse, their partner, their children. It's just so powerful. Well, I had started in this area back in the 90s, but in the late 90s and early 2000 era, I was contacted by Hugh Massie. And Hugh Massie was in Sydney, Australia. And he had a financial advising company down there in Sydney, but he really got interested in human behavior and how that impacted finances and people's decisions in finances. And so he really wanted to get more into that. And he came to the US and we met and started our relationship. And not too long, a couple of 3 years after that, he moved to Atlanta, and we've had a strategic partnership ever since. So with that, one other thing is this whole idea of behavior and finances and families is still very important to him. And I'll let Hugh tell you a little bit more about that. Go ahead, Hugh.
Thank you, Lee. Well, it's been a great, fun, wonderful journey over the last 20 years with you. And I continue to learn, more and more every day. Luckily, you and I have pretty similar communication styles for the most part, so we can get away with being direct and in your face with each other, but maybe not with everybody else. So monitoring that with others is important. And I've learned a lot about it, in how I am in dealing with my mother and my brother, who was polar opposite to me, for instance. This has shed a lot of light. But you know, when I was working in the financial advisory field and working with high net worth families, which I still do, and I do work with Brian in that area and some others, that communication within the family unit was so important, and a lot of people have attribute family breakdowns whether it's in the family business or passing on wealth or just moving from generation to the next generation. They put the problem on money, but it's not really money. And as I came to learn, it was really about communication, and that if the communication was wrong, then it would manifest itself in money. And that's really where my passion for this lies, that at the end of the day, to help a family business succeed, thrive from generation to generation, for the family to talk to each other at Thanksgiving, notwithstanding that they've got wealth, it's important that the communication be dealt with and understood. And it's really understanding inherently each person's differences and how they wish to be communicated with, and particularly as the family leader or as a parent, learning to communicate with your family members on their terms is very important. So, you know, and this is an area that I have a shared passion with Brian as well, Brian Brogan, who I'd like to now introduce, who's a adjunct professor at St. Joseph's University, and he is working with families, entrepreneurs, helping them with financial issues, but also the psychological issues. Brian has had a very diverse career as an entrepreneurial, a business owner, financial advisor, and also as a psychologist. So he's got a lot to bring to the table here in helping us understand family business leadership. So Brian, over to you.
Great, thanks, Hugh. I appreciate it. Let's see. And Hugh, can you see that screen, or do you see my?
Yes.
Yeah, we see the screen.
Okay, good. Thank you, Hugh, and thank you, DNA Behavior, for having me as a host, a guest today, to talk about all the diverse topics that I'd like to talk about, which is behavioral finance, family dynamics, business strategy, entrepreneurship, and all the above. Really, I think at the end of the day, we're talking about one of my passions, which is behavioral finance, which is why smart people, the definition of behavioral finance would be, in my opinion, just a common definition would be why smart people make poor financial decisions. And why is that? It's really because some of it's because it's ingrained or innate with us, some of the hardwiring that happens. We're either born with it, or we learn it, the behavior, or we get to a point which we're talking about today, where it's a discovery. And that has to do with what Lee was talking about, which is really assessment and awareness of what's going on with you, your family business, and your interaction. You know, so we're going to talk about kind of successful organizations and not so successful family dynamics, and the relationships and the elements that make a successful organization. The four things I want to talk about really are kind of awareness, which Lee hinted, communication, which Hugh has hinted, and how those two really lead to cohesiveness, which if you think of that word, I love that word, cohesiveness. It really, it's like, I think of glue when I think of cohesiveness. And you need a certain amount of glue in a family business. And then that leads to really the next topic, which is enmeshment. And enmeshment is traditionally a bad thing, but we'll talk why that's a good thing today. And looking at a family business and looking at some of the things we want to talk about, we're gonna, some of the concepts you see on the screen here is that you have a red family, yellow family, and a green light family. And so in the world of addictions where I came from, we worked with a lot of yellow and red light families, and we found that challenging and rewarding. But really, in working with family businesses, these are not really a place that you should be exploring, because it is taking another skill set of really being a family therapist, if you will. It doesn't mean that you can't take those skill sets as a family therapist and infuse them in working with yellow families or green light families. So families that are red light are very exciting, but they will eventually disintegrate, and we'll talk about why. But families who are yellow, they can learn and grow if their core values are present. And I'm sure you've heard Lee and Hugh talk about how to get to and define the core values of a family. And families need more time if they're yellow to get in alignment, to get on what we call get on the same page, and to have a voice for everybody in the family. And to when you're divulging and discovering the family story, that's where you find things like work ethic or putting the family first. These are concepts which will get in alignment when you do a discovery around a family. Now, of course, the outcomes that we want for these families, we want successful and positive outcomes that are aligned. And that usually happens when you have an alignment of faith, purpose, and the true worth of the family. So one of the major research that comes from some of the work in family systems is really this idea of family systems versus a business system. And so what we found is that whatever your dynamic is in your interpersonal relationship within your nuclear family or extended family, nuclear family would be your mom, your dad, your brothers and sisters, your siblings. Your extended family would be your in-laws and your grandparents. So how you relate in that system, you bring that to the workplace, and it starts to manifest consciously and subconsciously. So that's something to very, very much keep in mind. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that. Lee, do you want to go into, do you want me to keep going, or do you want me to ask a question?
Brian, which slide are you seeing on your screen now?
The green light family.
Okay. Yeah, that's one we're looking. I just wasn't sure if you were still on that one. Yes.
Okay.
You know, from my experience, I've worked with a good number of small businesses that are family businesses, and it's a very, very difficult thing to pull that off and make it last without having a lot of family feuds, so to speak. And it takes a lot of work. The ones that I have seen that made it work in a healthy way, they actually had a business coach, and the leadership had all their leadership team involved in monthly meetings where they were doing some leadership development and team development, and they were working on it all the time because they were kind of a dysfunctional families in some ways, but they were really good people, but they worked on it all the time. So to gain that alignment, that's really what they were doing so that they could be cohesive.
Yeah. And to the degree that the family system can both manage the business system and the family system. So to the degree in which they can balance both of those is really the degree to which the family business will succeed.
Yep.
Okay. So another thing that we'll talk about today is really boundaries. And this is a great book by Dr. Cloud and John Townsend, which is really establishing and understanding boundaries. This goes to roles and responsibilities. And of course, Hugh and Lee, and we all know that if we take the time to define in a very concrete way roles and responsibilities, this is also part of the assessment to find out what we're good at, to find out what is a kind of how we're hardwired, what's our innate capacity, whether we're a facilitator or initiator, and understanding this. Once we understand how our siblings are different from us, we garner a greater sense of control and respect in the relationship, which is incredible. And it's really about, now here's the tricky thing I'm going to share with you with family businesses. Traditionally, enmeshment is considered a bad thing. It's considered controlling and when you study family systems. So you might have an overbearing father and a son that just can't get out of the shadow. Or you might have two bulls in a china shop. Like my family, my father had a very strong personality. Well, guess what? His middle child was just like him, very strong personality also. So the two of us had to be very careful when we were working together that we were very much online in task, and we didn't have any ill feelings that were not communicated or resolved, because there might be overlap of boundaries, and feeling of disrespect or some sort of slight would come out in the workplace in a kind of passive aggressive way. So we were talking about sarcasm earlier before the call. And even things like sarcasm have an underlying theme of aggression. And so if you have grievances and conflict, there should be a process in which those things get aired out, recognized, and dealt with. Hugh, would you agree with that?
I agree with all of that. You've got to have the process to air everything out, and I think that's where Lee's point of having a coach in the family can help. One of my insights that I've sort of gained over the last year or so, particularly, has been the need for each family member to have their own identity and to be aware of that. So that's not just the talents, but their own purpose, having clarity of who they want to be in the world, and then also their role in the family unit, which to me comes down to significance. And if all of that is clear, and I think you used the word, Brian, aligned within the family, then there'll be a lot fewer disputes. Emotions won't take over, and sensible outcomes can be reached, even if there's a bit of negotiation, because there's that fundamental clarity about who they are as human beings. And I think that's part of the problem when a son gets lost in the shadow of a father, or a daughter is squabbling with the mother, or somebody's not perceived that they're good by their parents, then that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you had mentioned having a mediator to help, and that's a crucial role, whether it's a business coach or a family coach, really this trusted advisor we're talking about. They act as a mediator, almost like a translator sometimes, because of those emotions can get so blurry, and that's a core of behavioral finance. It's really taking the emotion out of the decision-making process so that you don't get a clouded decision in that role. I do want to mention, my background is specialization in addictions. And now we know for a fact that, over 50% of all family business will have an addicted individual in that system. And I'm here to say we're getting less information than we did in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s around addictions and the family system. It's almost out of vogue in the research area. I think maybe the opiate crisis might have something to do with that and overshadowing it. But it's very important that people who work with families, you're going to bump into this. Again, it doesn't mean that you're going to be in the deep end, but to have the awareness to assess it is really what I want to bring to the forefront today. So families, my opinion is that all families are dysfunctional. I come from a nice 100% Irish Catholic family. People used to ask, what'd you do with your master's in psychology? And I said, well, I survived an Irish Catholic family. And so that in of itself should give me a gold star. But really, all families are functional. They may not be optimal in their functionality at 100 on a scale or on a continuum. But there is this red light, yellow light, green light in that spectrum, if you will. And so most families are yellow to green, and that's where you want to be. But if you do you can really train yourself to see and the sniff test, if you will, to pick up addiction or lack of communication, resentment. These things the longer you spend with the family, they will show up. And I want to give you a couple of the roles that are just classic from the old John Bradshaw model. So you see here, you have the addicted person in one circle at the top, and then you have a co-addicted, which would be almost like a codependent. Now, all families, especially family businesses, are enmeshed or codependent. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's really how it functions. So, but if you do have an addicted and co-addicted enabler, you will have roles that get placed on the children or the family members that may not be too healthy. The first one's enabler. The second one is scapegoat. Now, scapegoat is somebody gets blamed for a lot of things. You might have a hero, somebody that gets all A's and they're the captain of the sports team, and she or he may be somebody that they know is a steady Eddie, no issues. You might have a wanderer, or what they call a lost child. I'm thinking of a family right now. The youngest child is disengaged with the family business because he does not see a role for himself. He's now becoming a lost child, or a risk of becoming a lost child, and lack of engagement. So this does show up even in healthy families. You have a mascot or a clown, somebody who's just making everybody laugh and is kind of quailing or basically a stabilizer, if you will, in a dysfunctional system. And then you have the caretaker. Now, it doesn't mean that you're set in these roles. It used to be thought of that if you're in this role, you stay in this role. I'm here to tell you, I grew up in a dysfunctional system and I played all these roles at one point in my life. Now, the goal is to get on the other side of the fence. And that's why the DNA, behavior, leadership, and financial part of assessment is so key. I'm here to tell you they've built off the big 5 personalities, and really the assessment and knowing and being aware of who you are, what makes you tick, what's your innate ability, what's your learned ability, and what is it that you have an awareness of, and really what's coming to the forefront in your mind. Now, always present is this sense of denial or white elephant in the room. So it might be a health issue that no one's addressing. I have a family where a member is severely overweight and has a disability, and not once in the 2 months into talking to the family has anybody suggested a nutrition plan, a nutritional plan for the founder. And so that's something that I'm slowly planting the seed, and that's something that that's kind of what we're talking about here. All right. Lee or Hugh, before I go on, do you want to, do we have questions?
I have one thing, and this is really good because you're touching on so many things that impact all of us. Kevin, we have a kind of a question that Kevin might want to throw in here that would kind of take us right into this. Kevin, you want to share that question?
Yeah, we talked about earlier, Lee, discussing really the marriage and or partner relationships specifically. You know, we've all spent so much time with our families in the past year due to quarantine or working virtually. And so understanding those realities, have you noticed, or have you noticed with your clients or with your contacts or colleagues, any differences in your relationships caused by this change over the last year in personalities, especially with someone who's quite different in their natural wiring? Lee, you can speak to that first, and then obviously we want to hear from Brian and Hugh too on this idea.
Yeah, I think Hugh and I'll give a quick answer and then let Brian, and there may be something from the audience too. Because of my years of training, I told you I'm a slow learner. During this COVID time, I have worked so hard to be patient and kind and less intense and supportive to my wife that we have had a great year. We've been locked up in this house together. She has an office at home. She's a counselor. She's working remote there. And I've been working out of home, but we have actually had a really good year. And our marriage is probably the best place it's ever been. So only because I got smarter through this kind of stuff when I saw those graphs about 15 or 20 years ago and started learning about myself and others and the differences. Hugh?
Yeah, I would say that pretty similar for me. I think the last year has been fantastic. One, just spending more time at home, but I think it does take a lot of understanding, acceptance, and respect, which is really, Lee, our 3 words that are the framework for teamwork. That's absolutely important, particularly in the COVID times when we're all under a lot more stress. I think where I've seen people be challenged in the COVID times is because they've lost their own purpose. They're not quite sure what's driving them, or what's important, and all those things get exposed because you can't just escape from the house like you once did. You're locked in there, and I think if there are problems, they start to jump out, and you've either can work through them or not work through them.
Great. One of the things I would say is that I remember turning to my wife early in the pandemic and saying to her, through this, we're going to find out, a lot of parents are going to find out that they don't like their kids. And that's a truthful statement, because even Jordan Peterson in his great book, 12 Rules to Live By, actually has this as one of the rules, which is don't let your kids do something that will make you not like them, right? So it has to deal with what you tolerate, what's the benchmark standard in the family, which should follow the value system, and how that system is communicating and getting voices heard. So if we're all in a cramped space together, voices need to be heard. They need to be listened to, empathically digested, which means we need to feel other people's feelings and understand and have compassion. So my wife, most like Hugh and Lee, my wife and I are total opposites. I'm an initiator, creative. I like having Post-it things stuck on the wall, and a little bit of chaos is what I like in my environment. And my wife is to the T, very neat and very orderly. So we are having conversations even currently about reorganizing home office space. And that is really a great tool to use as building communication, because that, if we do that successfully, that's going to lead to intimacy, right? So, you know, the number one thing when we talk about money and relationships is the classic thing. What's the number one reason for divorce? Everyone will say money. Well, that's not the case. The number one reason for divorce is a lack of intimacy. And what is intimacy other than the disclosure and the opening up of communication of desires, wants, feelings, so that people get on the same page. They recognize it, the sacred, they recognize the sacred in each other, and they bow to it, which is a beautiful thing. And
I think it's a really interesting point, Brian, because I think what it brings out is what has meaning for you, and being able to discuss that and get on the same page. Because we've been doing a bit of that in our household of some clearing out, and it's amazing how complex and you can make your life with lots of stuff that really isn't very important, but it actually causes more problems.
Yeah.
And so it's not about, you know, clearing out the house and having some conversations on those things is not a bad way of you know, building the pathway forward.
You know, Hugh, it's so amazing you talk about stuff. We've had at least 5 conversations in the last week about getting rid of stuff. And this very thing, and we've had good conversations because of what we've learned, but it is a little bit of a tender point for a lot of people, because a lot of our stuff we have an emotional attachment to.
Yeah.
You know?
And I will jump in, and this is very much relatable. This summer, I remember clearing out some items. I bought a family home years ago, and we still had my dad's sister's baby stuff. Now, she died at the age of 8 years old from meningitis, from a mosquito bite. And it really sent the whole family in a tailspin. And we're talking about, I want to say, 1944. So during that time, people who had grieving or loss of a loved one didn't have the psychological availability they have today to go to counseling. So all these emotions were stuffed, they were repressed. And sure enough, I am one of the people in the family that's honoring the sacred emotion around that and recognizing it. And I literally, with physical items of hers, I had to honor it, take it out, give it its due, feel the emotion, and then release it. And through this, I found that this was something very key in families, and why addiction, or the elephant in the room, does happen, because there's lack of resources to handle the emotional baggage, emotional trauma that happens. So this is another key thing that's true. You know, our lives are so busy that we sometimes don't you know, recognize or honor certain things in the family. And so that's one thing I learned over this past 12 months, is by taking the time to honor something that was not honored literally 70 years ago, has done an incredible opening up in our family. And so that's what we're talking about also, is it's not necessarily what's happening right here and now. It's really doing this genealogy, or genogram, if you will, of kind of what I call the sins of the father that get passed down until somebody, it becomes an emotive, or somebody can handle that pain and trauma. You know,
Brian, the power for me of the assessment and the DNA behavior, of being able to see something visually that is mathematically measured, to say 2 standard deviations apart, I'm the kind of person that I'm a logic person. And once I see that logically, I know that I cannot expect that other person to be like me. I can't expect them. They can never be like me. They can't adapt that far. They can adapt a little bit, but not that much. And so I've had to coach myself every day to adapt. And part of my life is a big part of it is coaching myself not to go over the top. I'm loud, I'm emotional, I'm expressive. And those kind of things are not very well suited for my wife and for lots of other people. So that visual graphic really got my attention. And once you see that, you get that self-awareness, well, I'm this way and these are my struggles. Then you start to give grace to other people and let them be different and really okay. My brother and I are light years apart also. And so that, I think, is the power sometimes of getting started in that self-awareness.
There's a question in the chat about talking about in-laws. And I'll just share with something that came up with a client family recently. One of the sons is about to get married, and so they're blending families here, if you will. And one side of the family does not drink. They're devout Christians, and they don't believe in alcohol. So I was asking about how do you approach that? And it really was about making sure that we knew what the original family, both origin of families, what's their value system and what's true to them, and seeing if they can mesh. If they can't mesh, how can we honor each other's respects and wishes without necessarily giving up our value system, which I think is very key. So when you are having, there's a lot of work now with prenuptials with families, and blending of two wealthy families, if you will, like that's what's happening in this case that I'm talking about. And so that was a big deal. Should we bring alcohol to the engagement party? And so it could be just as simple as that. But these are small little things as far as the mosaic that are very important.
Hugh?
Well, I think you touched on a big word there, Brian, is values, and for the family understanding what their values are and where they've come from, which is often part of the family history. So that's something that's very important to do, and to lay them out and in a way own up to them as well, and be true to them.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, Kevin, did you have another question?
Yeah, we also wanted to talk about the challenges of managing the natural behaviors of children at home specifically. And so, that could be learning styles, parent leadership, communication, boundaries. Hugh, if you'll just kind of share your initial comments on that as a father of younger children, and then the guest, y'all jump into Lee and Brian.
Well, I think it's good to put this in context for everybody. I only, as a parent, you only know what you know from what you've experienced. So I have a daughter that's just turned 10 a few weeks ago and a son who's 8. And my daughter, when she was 4 years old, at about 9 o'clock at night, so she'd been in bed for quite a while, at least an hour and a half. But anyway, she decided to wake up and walk down the stairs from her bedroom to where I was watching TV with my wife, Jennifer. And she just said to Jennifer, "Mum, I'm the boss." And Mum said, "No, you're not." And then Catherine said, "Well, I'll start being the boss tomorrow." And that conversation has gone on like that ever since. And, even last week, Catherine's busy telling us, well, I'm going to make my own decisions and I'm responsible for them. And so that started, another conversation. So you can see that I've got, a daughter who is very, quite forceful, quite direct in her communication. She knows what she wants. And my son is quite different, and he's much more, he's clear about who he is, but he's very friendly, very engaging, much softer, much more feelings-based. So, in working with the two children, managing them, the way we have conversations with them is different because of their styles. Neither of the two of them want to disappoint us, but they need to be addressed at times in a different way. With my daughter, it can be a lot more direct. my son, we need to sit him down. Everybody needs to be relaxed and cool, calm, and collected. Create that kind of environment to, tell him what he needs to do next, or to correct him. So this behaviour started from being there all along, and it's never changed. It's a little bit, okay, we've got to work with them to get them to see that when they're overplaying their style a bit too much, and modify so they understand their impact, and particularly with the stronger one. So that's sort of how we work with it. But these differences are there right from the start, and I'm very conscious of what is said to them or not said to them at this stage is very important, because it could create entitlements later on. They could harbor something for a long time. I think Brian had a slide up there about the lost child. You do not want to allow a child to get disengaged from the family, and that can start very early on if you're not careful.
Yeah, that's great, Hugh. I appreciate that. I'm going to show a slide real quick. So understanding the relationship between cohesion and team behavior. So I do teach sports psychology here, and you would think, well, what does that have to do with family business? And quite honestly, there's a lot of overlapping elements when it comes to sports psychology, specifically coaching and team leadership. One thing that comes to mind is we're in Philadelphia here, and we have the 76ers, which are one of our only hopes here in the town now that the Eagles have lacked to fly the coop here. And so Doc Rivers is our new coach, and this guy is a master in what they call buy-in, right? Buy-in is getting people on the same page to collectively, this enmeshment, right? To get them all going on the same page in the same way. So when we talk about a family business, we had to act as coaches, really good coaches for our families. We had to encourage, we had to motivate, and we had to keep them on point and on the same page. So one of the things you can see here is task cohesion, and also that's basically the degree to which members of the team work together on a specific task. So we went skiing last weekend, and I had a conversation with the kids before we went that this is the goal. If you deviate from the goal, we will not be doing this again. We have to stay on point and stay on task. If we do that, there will be a lot of fun that we will receive. So part of the family business is really being the coach of and a leader, and all great leaders have a aim. They have a goal. They can point you to the direction which they're going, and they know how to get there. Social cohesion, the degree to which the members of the team like each other and enjoy and have personal satisfaction from being part of the team. Now, this is the key to honor everybody's individuality, much like Hugh's daughter saying that she is the boss. Well, guess what? That's great. We had to nurture that without breaking the will of the child. So we had to fan that flame so that she can build those traits of leadership without feeling discouraged, right? And have fun with it. So social cohesion is about having fun. It's also the glue. Teammates pick up each other and carry each other both on and off the field. So it's this idea of we're in it together. This idea that, a lot of times the value system that we do, or just the name. So we have a thing in our family, my last name's Brogan, and we say this is the Brogan way. We never give up. That's one of our main mottos of Brogan's. We never give up. It might take us a little bit of time to achieve our goal, but we will achieve it because the persistence is a key value in our family system. So being on task and having a social cohesion and honoring people and respecting people and allowing for individuality, I think is key.
Yeah, that tracks with our results relationship. The results, you have to achieve the mission, the goal, and relationships, you have to have situations where in an organization, whether it's a family or a work situation, where people feel valued. Hugh uses the word significance, and that is so important. I just wanted to mention that in working with leaders over the years, male and female leaders, lots of both, the one thing I always want to see, I want to see them become healthier, because we all have some areas of unhealthiness we picked up along the way. Nobody comes from a perfect home. a perfect neighborhood and had perfect bosses and perfect teachers and coaches. We all get stung, and we've got some dysfunctions along the way. We got some pain tags. And so when you as a person or as a leader, you get healthier, you free others around you to get healthier by being a healthy person who's able to give love, who's able to give that connection that makes people feel valued and important. And when you can give rather than trying to take to make yourself feel better, it is so powerful, and especially at home, of course, and that's where it all starts. But at work, as a leader, when your people feel valued, important, significant, it really draws them in, and they want to achieve the goals. They want to do better than you're expecting and show you they're part of that team. Same thing at home.
Yeah, I think, Lee, it comes back to the word you used at the start in your introduction today, that a lot of the work you're doing at the moment, with business leaders is around confidence. And, I think that inner confidence is so important, and it's important to build that in the family, for the children, so that their confidence doesn't get destroyed. Wherever they're at in life, they've got to be supported and, helped up. I think that's where sports can be, a wonderful thing as well for building that confidence and, having that place of support. It can also be a place where the confidence gets ruined as well, if there's the wrong communication. And that's where, I think great communication and understanding how to adapt your communication comes back to building the confidence, which is so important for success.
Excellent. I saw a comment from Keith in the chat talking about Abraham Maslow. Stealing a little bit of my thunder here. I was just going to talk about that, which is, this movement towards an altruistic person and the hierarchy of needs to be self-actualized is, I think, what Lee's talking about. When you get to a point of awareness and self-love, really at the end of the day, that you can then invert that and push that outwards. Then you become an incredible charismatic leader. And really an influencer to those who are around you. People want to be around you versus the opposite, which is very, very powerful.
Yes, I'm always thinking, and when I'm coaching a leader, one of the things I tell them is, we'll know that you're growing when somebody at home says, there's something different about you and I really like it. You'll know you're making progress, because it usually shows up at home first. If you become a better listener, people at home are going to notice that. If you learn to speak up a little bit more and express your opinions, and you've had to grow in that, people are going to notice that and they're going to appreciate it. So regardless of what your struggles are as a person, the more you learn to adapt out of them, the more healthy you're going to be in family, at work, and everywhere.
I measure that by hugs from my daughter.
Yeah.
It seems like when I'm more open and less reserved, she picks up on it very keenly, and I get more hugs.
Oh. Kevin, did you have a poll question or another question for us?
We had one related specifically, Lee, to children, and we kind of wanted to get a quote unquote temperature in the room with our guests. So guests and participants, this question is really for you. I've launched the poll. You'll see it on your screen. And the question is, during the last year, have you had any breakthroughs with understanding how to communicate better with your family members, and especially children? So go ahead and place your vote. You have one of 5 answers that you can give us, and we'll take about 20 seconds and gather some answers to this question. Have you had any breakthroughs with understanding how to communicate better with your family members over the last year specifically? Those questions the answers are coming in. Good. Thank you for voting. Thank you for sharing your vote. Yep. All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'll share the results with you. So yeah, 33% of you saying a little. And so there's room for improvement, room for growth, lots of dynamics going on in a family situation. But thank you for your honest answer to this anonymous survey question. Any comments on that about our results?
I think that to me, Kevin, the results are pretty good when you look at, okay, 33% says say a little, but then we sort of stream upwards to there being some big improvements. I think that's fantastic. And I wonder whether that's because families have had to work together more. Both mum and dad have been at home in the house a whole lot more, to make it work. As it's easy to, like I was traveling at least once a week, sometimes longer trips. You're away a lot. It's easy for there to be communication breakdowns if you haven't worked at it well. But having everybody in the home maybe has made it work. But I'd be interested from some of the participants to put in the chat box, particularly where they think there's been significant progress, why that is the case. That would be, I think, interesting for us to know.
Yeah, good idea.
I agree. Did you want to go on to the next question? This one is really, and we've circled the topic throughout the entire event today, but it's really the family unit as a whole. And Brian, feel free to speak into this particular question. And if you're willing to share, what unique family dynamic challenges have you faced over the past year? Could be communication challenges, organizing, responding differently to the loss of freedom. It could be a variety of things. And everyone, I want you to speak in, but Brian, if you want to share a story or anything.
Well, I think it really all depends on the stage of life that children are in a developmental stage where they're at, whether, what's their ability and capacity. So for my, and personality, of course. So, I think for my 7th grader who's in a new school, it's challenging socially. So I think for both my children, it's a social awareness. I'm very concerned about the negative impacts of the coronavirus to our younger children socially. One, because nonverbal communication is close to, let's just pick a number, 65, 70% of communication is nonverbal. And so if you remove half of your face and you're a person who reads people's nonverbal, which we all do in a subconscious way, there's a lack of connection. So if you are an introverted, shy person and you need that cue to initiate and to build rapport, you've just lost a big, big element of building relationships. So I'm very concerned, very, very concerned about this situation. So I am moving, I'm putting money at this problem, meaning that we will go to outdoor activities and social distance where we can either do things in the wood, like skirmishing for my teenage boy, or go roller skating or ice skating, and maybe an environment where they can start to talk to each other in a safe distance, with or without the mask. I know that's the trouble we're in, and so it's really about the emotional development and the socialization of our children. We will not know the damage that has been done for many, many years. And it will show up. It'll show up in our workplace. It'll show up in our homes and family formation, which has already been pushed to a very old age of 30 plus. And so these are things that I can't say that I'm too optimistic about the situation. I'm very concerned. But I think it's important to talk about it and for good minds to come together and try to solve these and make solutions for these issues.
Yeah, good points there. Thank you, Brian. You said, I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but I remember from my early experience with these behavioral assessments and some of my readings is that when a person is in early teens, especially, but in teenager timeframe, people are much more social. That social need comes on strong. And so a lot of introverts who are introverts as adults, they're pretty social at 13 or 14 or 15. You just can't help it because that's when, everybody's kind of going like this, reaching out. You want to be connected if you can. And so you're into that. You're pushing yourself into that. And so I see the point you're making is they're missing out on something that's really important there. I think that's true. As a person working on being a giver, more of a giver and less of a taker, going back to the inner confidence stuff that Hugh and I've mentioned a couple of times is so important. And I see this over and over and over again. And I've actually been working on a model. Hugh and I've been talking a lot about identity. We're working on different things. And so I've got this model of secure to insecure leadership on a continuum, or individuals. Let's see, left side for you would be insecure over here, insecure over here. And we're all sliding back on that, forth on that continuum. And the healthier you are, the more time you're going to spend on the secure side of being okay with yourself. And so as an adult, as a parent, when you can invest in your kids and help them believe in themselves, you are moving them over toward the secure side. For me, those words of encouragement, believing in them, affirming them, listening to them, those kind of things are little slivers of love, unconditional love. Whether you're a leader in the workplace or a parent at home, you're sending a sliver of love at that person that makes them feel like it's unconditional love, even though it's not hug love. And that builds their confidence. It helps them to believe in themselves so that they are going to be a healthier person. And the more that you get, the healthier you're going to get. So as a parent, I'm trying to give that. As a grandparent, I'm really working on that right now because I have some teenage grandkids, and I know how important that is. So all of that goes back to, I learned all this from my days in learning behavior a few years ago and working with Hugh. And Hugh and I have written a lot about this, how to relate to people who are different, how to understand yourself, and how to relate to people who are different in the book we just did last year. And Kevin will tell you about that at the end of the program today.
Yeah, so I've been reflecting on what's said, Lee. I think that the kids being at home more at the moment, in a way, can help you as a parent, encouraging them, getting closer, watching some of the things they're doing, nurturing them, building their confidence. But also, I've certainly seen with my two children, their overall behavior is far better when they've been able to go to school and interact. Now, I've got two more extroverted children, and my wife and I are more introverted, but getting them to school has been important. So that, I think there's an energy release there. They're connecting with their friends. They're talking. They're seeing what others are doing. They've got good relationships with their teachers. I think so. The socialization point that Brian was bringing up is also extremely important. So we've been lucky with that. And I think that is a problem of this pandemic is there's going to be a side effect from some lack of socialization, and all of us have got to be more inventive how to get everybody socializing more, because as humans, we are social beings at the end of the day, whether we're extroverted or introverted.
Great, Hugh, and a great way to be innovative and creative around this. One of the things I might offer back to this buy-in concept where you're getting, your family unit is your team, right? Team Brogan for me. And so we have my son and my daughter, 15 and 12, and my wife. We're together over 20 years. And so we borrow from the Marines. Improvise, adapt, overcome. Improvise, adapt, overcome. I married into a Marine family, and I just love everything about the Marines and Navy SEALs and all the above. And if our goal is to create resilient kids who have grit, I think one, this pandemic is doing that for us. But the other part is to initiate concepts for buy-in, right? So again, with the family motto, I would implore you to sit down with your family and ask them, what is our family motto? What is something that we can grab onto? What is something that we can have a meme or a theme, an abstract? It's abstract, but it's concrete. And this really helps empower kids, that they know that. And of course, what you're doing is you're modeling that behavior for your children. So I've been extremely conscientious to be extremely positive. And so I don't let them see a chink in the armor. I do the sulking or depressive episodes in private. I will not let my kids see that through this pandemic, because they will pick up on that. I will share that with other adult peers and get my release that way. But to model your behavior, your attitude is what you can control. Your outlook, the theme, the buy-in. This is really how we're going to build resilient kids who have grit, who listen. We don't know if it's going to get better. We don't know if it's going to get worse, but we do know that we can handle it. We can handle life on life's terms, and we can adapt, improvise, and overcome. And this is a great empowering thing to give to children because it's a sense of locus of control that we're sharing with them and modeling for them.
Wow, good idea. Adapt, improvise, and
Overcome.
overcome. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we did have one question. We have time, a couple of minutes to answer it if you'd like to take this question. Is an attendee submitted about healthy confidence and how important that healthy confidence is. Do you think there's such a thing as negative confidence, bullying, false claims of success, and so on? So if you'll address that question.
I'll jump in first and give you guys a minute to think about it. Unhealthy confidence really is almost a misnomer, because I think it's pride. You see some unhealthy confidence exhibited as pride sometimes to cover the fear that's underneath, the doubts, the personal doubts that are underneath, so a person kind of acts out. Because I think true confidence also comes with humility, because when you're truly confident, you're okay with yourself, at least in that area, then you can give room to other people to be good and compete and be the same as you. You're not threatened by other people's presence in those areas. So the whole idea of confidence and humility in a leadership, that's one of the most important things we deal with. How can you be confident and humble? Being humble means I'm okay with myself, and I'm not afraid of accepting responsibility for my mistakes. I'll take that and I learn from them and I move ahead. And I'm not threatened by you being better at this than I am. That's true confidence and humility.
Yeah, I think to back that up, I agree with everything Lee said. I think, a person who's truly confident will be internally aligned, to who they are, what their talents are, what they can do, knowing how to adapt to different situations, being aware of their purpose. I think that's when the internal alignment comes, and when there's that unhealthy confidence, which can sometimes be demonstrated with a lot of sort of outward behaviors that make them appear to be strong and in control. There's usually some lack of trust in themselves, and the only way they can deal with that is to act it out.
Yeah, I love that, Hugh. Lack of trust in themselves. There's a concept called imposter syndrome, which is new to millennials. It wasn't necessarily part of my generation. And I think it's because of this negative confidence or this false pride. Jordan Peterson says, these people will be found out in short order, which I agree. But it's really because they lack the confidence of earning their stripes, if you will. Right. So this concept that you put your time in, you earn your stripes, is a little bit lost to that generation. And I don't mean to paint it with broad strokes, but that's definitely true. And so really, I really believe that you had to instill a sense of what I call micro accomplishments. Right. So micro accomplishments are the small W's that lead to big W's. Mm-hmm. And confidence comes from winning. Confidence coming from accomplishments. Confidence comes from knowing, win or lose, that you did your best, and you can assess what your strengths and weaknesses or challenges are. So this idea, I remember my father saying years ago, you just need a bunch of small W's, and that way you can control that micro accomplishment. So I think that's great advice in this environment. We may not be able to go and do the greatest thing because of limitations with COVID, but these micro accomplishments, these small tasks, breaking them down to your day, if you can get 4 W's out of your day, you've had an incredible day. This concept of negative, neutral, and positive. And so I told my son before, some days, most all days are neutral, and that's a win. You don't need to hit home runs every day. Just getting through the day is a neutral. That's a win, as long as it's not a negative. And so it's a sense of that locus of control. That's a psyche stability, if you will, of knowing I'm okay, kind of to Lee's point, I'm okay, I can handle this, and I'm pushing through in a confident manner. Hopefully that's helpful.
as a fighter pilot, you learned that. You had to have that kind of confidence that I can get through this. I just got to sort it out. I'm not giving up. I'll get through this. But also know where there was that boundary where you go over that boundary and you're probably dead. So getting right up to the edge, though, was a big part of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that we do have a download for you, a handout that's going to be very important in helping you learn how to relate to others. Kevin's bringing it up on the screen. And this is really, we're giving away the kitchen sink and everything, all the good food in the pantry here. It's a very powerful tool. So be sure and take a look at that. And Hugh, you might mention the book. We thank you all so much for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun. And you know, the stuff we're talking about, this changes lives, it changes families, it changes the workplace. It's so impactful because it really all comes down to we're human beings and we have to be a human being and we work with human beings, and we are not 2 + 2 = 4. We're very much more complicated than that, and that's what makes it fun. Hugh?
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for being on the call today, and Lee for co-hosting with me, and Brian particularly for your very deep insights. And yeah, I'd encourage everybody to read the book. I think not only will you find out more about your own natural talents, but I think it's the second part of the subtitle there, Managing Differences, that's so important, particularly in the family context, and the book provides great insights for that.
Yep. Thanks again, Brian, for bringing your expertise. I learned a lot from you today and really appreciated it. You got me thinking about some things that I'm going to think about some more.
Thank you so much. It's a true honor to be here, and thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending today, and thank you, guests, for sharing your wisdom and experience. You'll have a good day. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.